Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing, and today we've got a new choke that has been very highly requested. A lot of you guys have really wanted to see this choke in particular, and I definitely wanted to pick one up as well to try it and see what it was capable of. We know one of the other versions of it is a very nice performer, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what we can get from this, because I've got some pretty decent hopes for it as well. But to start off with, the buckshot shells that we're going to be running today are some of these, the Winchester Super X loads. About as basic and classic as you can get. They're a 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, 9 pellet double aught load at 1325 feet per second. Everybody knows these. We know that they are pretty much the average performer. They're nothing over the top special, but they're not terrible either. So we'll see how they do through this new choke. As for our setup that we're going to be running them through, I brought out the Remington 1187. It's got a 28-inch barrel on it, but for that new choke, we've got a Kicks buck kicker, which we've tested the buck kicker full before, but this is the Kicks buck kicker extra full. We have never tested the extra full variant. We know the full is a very solid performer, but a lot of you guys have wanted to see what the extra full could do. The regular buck kicker full is supposed to be a 695 constriction, and these extra full are supposed to be a 690, but from what I've seen, Kicks runs a touch tighter than advertised on their chokes. This exact extra full is a 688 constriction, so just a hair tighter than that 690 claim. But a lot of you guys have wanted to see the extra full, so I figured we'll start with pretty much the baseline shell with these Super X loads, and we'll see what we can get. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got a big sheet of paper at 40 yards, the chronograph so we can get our velocity, and the templates so we can lay up over our results. I have some decent hopes for this combination. I still don't think it's going to be anything too over the top necessarily, you know, that screaming tight 10-inch pattern, but you never know. We might be a little bit limited by the Super X shells in general, but let's take our shot and see what this combo is able to give us for a starting point. All right, that shell gave us 1301 through the chrono. Boss claim is 1325, so we are just a little bit under that claim with our 28-inch barrel, but we're still well within the ballpark, I would say. 1300 for a 9 pellet loaded double aught is very much so average. So nothing too strange to see up here for velocity, but how well did they actually pattern through that Kicks extra full down there at 40? Let's go check it out and see. All right, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and we see a very solid result. For a shell that is only a buffered payload, these are not plated, they don't have a wad or anything special like that. This is a very solid performance, and probably the tightest overall spread we've seen from a Super X shell as well. We did have all 9 pellets on the paper, and the paper's 36 inches wide, but we see a pretty even and uniform spread of pellets here. We did string maybe 1 or 2 a little bit farther over here to the right, but as far as the 9th pellet flyer goes or whatever, we really don't see anything super drastic like that in this pattern. Again, maybe 1 or 2 over there on the right, but they're really not strung way out like our typical 9th pellet flyer is. I did measure the farthest 2 points across, which is pretty much left to right on that pattern, gave us 17.5 inches of total spread. And like I always say, if you're under 20 inches at 40 yards, that's a pretty solid buckshot pattern. So 17.5 inches worth of spread for 9 pellets of double aught at 40, that's perfectly adequate. Is it a flight control load? No. However, we have seen much worse. There's no doubt about that. It isn't the ultimate pattern that we've gotten for buckshot, but you can't really complain too much about that, all things considered. But let's throw a few templates up and see how it would look for your average shooter or hunter or anything like that. So first up here, we have a 10-inch circle. If we put it in the center of our pattern where our core is, we had a definite 4 pellets with 1 down in the bottom left that's kind of halfway in, and 1 on the very right that's kind of halfway in as well. So 4 pellets for sure. If you want to call it 6 out of the 9, then I could see that as well. Either way, perfectly solid for a core area. It's not overly tight, but the pattern itself is just a little bit more of a broad or even spread rather than having a super hot core area. So looking perfectly fine for a 10-inch circle, but now let's swap over to some animal templates and see how it would look out in the field on a hunting scenario. So next up, we have our deer template. If we line it up with our point of aim, we would have hit the deer with all 9 of those pellets. And the majority of them are right through the vitals, right where you want them to be. So out to 40 yards, that combo of those Super X shells with that Kicks buck kicker extra full would be a perfectly adequate deer hunting combination, that's for sure. And this might be about the perfect pattern for some of you guys out there as well that might hunt in a couple different situations where you could potentially be sitting up against a tree or in a tree stand, or you could be doing some deer drives or running them with dogs or something like that. It's tight enough to where you're not going to completely hit every cut of meat on the deer, but it's a little bit more open and even of a spread where if you had to take a shot on a moving deer, it would give you a little bit extra leeway as well. So that is a very nice, very huntable combination. Now we'll swap over to the hog template. I think it's going to be pretty well the same story, but that'll give us another reference on a little bit smaller body sized animal as well, if you're a hog hunter or potentially even a predator hunter that wants to use these. So here is that hog template. Like I suspected, very much so the same story. Perfectly good enough for you guys down in the south to have pigs to deal with. That would get the job done all day long. A coyote would be a little bit smaller as far as body size go than that hog template is. So if you are predator hunting or even deer hunting and see a coyote and want to take a shot at it, out to 40 yards, that combo would be perfectly capable for those guys as well. Overall, like I've already mentioned several times, it's a perfectly fine result. It's not anything super over the top special, you know, sub 13 or 14 inches, down there in the 10-inch range or so, like we've seen from a couple other shells, but we've seen far worse, that's for sure. And I can tell you right now, that is most definitely an improvement over a stock full choke, and it's a little tighter than what we saw through the regular buck kicker full as well. So that extra full gave you a little extra constriction, and it did tighten the pattern down a little bit while holding them pretty evenly spread as well. So no real complaints from me. I'd say that's a perfectly fine starting point for us with this particular extra full choke. So now we got to run some other shells through it, some other pellet sizes and stuff, and see what it's capable of, because that right there is looking pretty decent. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that performance right there? At this point, I think we've pretty well covered everything. It's a perfectly adequate performance, and I'd say that's a perfectly average starting point to work off of with that choke. I know I definitely wouldn't hesitate to deer hunt with that kind of pattern, especially if I'm in a situation like I just mentioned where I could be still hunting, I could be running deer in one way or another or anything like that. That's about the perfect middle of the road option, I would say. It's not overly tight, but it's tight enough to where you're not going to be hitting everything on the deer. So I'd say we're off to a pretty good start here. I don't think there's a ton of complaining we can really do. For the Super X shells being about as baseline average as you can get, if we run some, you know, federal copper plated loads or something like that through that choke, I expect to see some pretty nasty looking results. At least in theory anyway. But leave all your thoughts down below. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Super X 9 pellet double aught loads or a Kicks buck kicker extra full? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from it? Is this a combo that you would ever run for a hunting situation or anything else? And what other shells might you want to see us run through that particular choke? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, you have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All the information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.